We are here to talk about the psychology of bicycling. And in fact, we are really going to talk a lot about social psychology, biases, errors in judgment, errors in thinking that result from just being a human.
Do you ever wonder why humans get so mad about bicyclists running a stop sign? Have you ever been told not to bring a bicycle indoors and not given a clear and logical reason? Have you ever felt frustrated just by driving a car in city traffic amongst other humans? Before we talk about the many sources of error in human judgment regarding bicycles, let's start with some definitions. Prejudice, a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. Bias, prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another. Discrimination, the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of humans or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. I can say that I am without prejudice because I run on programming. My programming not only tells me that I can attribute the fault to humans, and it is their own stupidity or inability to make proper decisions that causes their errors. I, on the other hand, have programming, which makes myself function more effectively.
Okay, so before we go into the examples, let me talk about that real quick. So we had prejudice, bias, and discrimination. Prejudice is that idea that you don't really have all the information. You know, as the word says, prejudge. You're making a decision on some individual and overgeneralizing based on the group that individual is in. And also, there's not really any clear evidence to support what your judgment. So bias is more of preference, one group over another, where you're like, okay, I love bicycles, so I don't like cars. You know, that would be a bias toward bicycles. Discrimination is not just being prejudiced and like taking an individual and generalizing to overgeneralizing, but it's actually more about actions that are taken that are disparate. But it's actually you're treating groups differently just because they're in that group. And again, it becomes an error when you're not discriminating for good reasons, you're just discriminating because they're in that group, and it's not based on any kind of evidence or reality. So let's watch some examples. You're going to decide, are they being prejudiced, are they biased, or are they discriminating? That there's going to be a little number and a letter in the upper left corner of the video. That's going to be like, for example, the first one will say 1A. So just so you know for your records, that'll be, okay, write down 1A and then write your answer. A is prejudice, B is bias, C is discrimination. Well, I definitely prefer cars to bicycles. And I actually prefer car drivers to bicyclists too, because they drive cars. So they're probably better. Now this one is interesting because it's clearly bias, where this character is saying that he prefers cars to bicycles, but he also threw that thing in there that, so then therefore he also likes car drivers better than bicyclists. So that's where you kind of leave the bias arena and get into prejudice and possibly discriminating behaviors. So we'll say biased for this one, but there's also definitely colors of prejudice. If you see a bicyclist, you should shame them because it's really a bad habit and it really causes a lot of problems in society. So what we have to do is discourage the bicyclists from doing what they want to do. Okay, so this one is really about discrimination more than just prejudice, because he's saying, you know, we have to take action, we have to discourage them, we have to shame them. You know, so again, you're treating one group differently than another. You're actually treating them differently, not just in your own psyche thinking of them differently, but treating them differently. So that is a clear case of discrimination.
I think it's pathetic. You know that the United States, it could be very great, but they're so stupid. They never understand how great they could be. So poo-poo to them, you know.
Okay, so this one's a tricky one because instead of looking at an individual and then making assumptions on the individual based on whether or not they're, say, American or French, as this person's saying, that he's really just comparing the two groups of Americans and French. So because there's no specific person involved here, it really could be a bias where this person has a bias toward French over American. He did say America could be great, but the people are stupid. So that's why I think maybe this is more of a bias. There is also a prejudice here. Obviously, this person would be prejudiced if they saw someone, you know, whatever that stupid behavior that he's indicating. So I would say we can be sure that there's a bias, and then we could kind of assume to some extent there's prejudice, but we can't be sure.
I think bicyclists should be children, because when I get older, I want a car.
So this person is definitely discriminating because he's saying that bicyclists can only be children. So you're giving one group the ability to do something, but not the other group. Now, obviously, he doesn't have any power to actually do any of that, but I would say this is a case of discrimination. Now, it's not in the legal sense of the term or in any applied setting, but in a theoretical setting, this is discrimination.
Well, the way I look at it is every bicyclist I've seen has done something against the law, so they must be guilty. I mean, let's just look at facts. You look at a bicyclist, they run a stop sign. You look at a car driver, well, they might roll through it slightly, but they're stopping much more than the bicyclist would.
This character is saying that bicyclists do this and car drivers do that. So it's not discrimination, probably not really an outright example of bias, but I would definitely say it's prejudice, because again, this person's seeing a bicyclist and assuming whatever this person's assuming about them. You know, they're not law-abiding, whatever. So I would say prejudice in this case.
First of all, I think the bicyclists are way too cocky. They ride their bicycles in and out of traffic. And they don't have respect for people who can't ride. I try getting on a bicycle, I can't. I sit on that stupid little seat. You see? There's another bicycle. That one has a motor, but still, they're cocky. So I don't think it's a good idea to build bike lanes, because if I can't do it, think of all the other people who can't do it. And they just get in the way of people like me who have an inability. And it's unfair because I'm bigger than your prejudice against me.
Okay, so this guy has a lot of issues, obviously, as do many of them. And definitely I would say prejudice. Okay, this guy's saying that bicyclists, they're cocky and this and that. So ascribing characteristics to bicyclists without really any good evidence. Now, the interesting thing here, we'll maybe get into this a little more later, but cocky is an interesting assertion because when you're commuting together on a road, it's kind of difficult to assess cockiness just from behaviors. Now, you can to some extent, but I would say that's really one of the places where this person's really overreaching, where it's just not able to make that judgment, and the fact that he's making that judgment about all bicyclists, that all bicyclists are cocky, including the motorcycle, apparently. So definitely prejudice across the board here. Okay, so just to sum up, so you have prejudice, bias, and discrimination. Obviously, these characters have a lot of other issues. We're going to get into that. But I hope you can see the difference here. I mean, prejudice is really just the kind of internal opinion. Bias is more of the this versus that. And discrimination is this versus that, but where you actually take action.